Hi, my name is Chef Craig, and we are going to be doing our handmade pasta today. We're going to be showing you how to hydrate the pasta, not necessarily roll it out into cuts and shapes. That'll come in a later time. But the main things that we need to make sure we have our flour and our salt, we have our eggs, a bench scraper, a fork, and then for purposes in the kitchen, we have a squirt bottle, which I will show you in a little bit, when we might need to use that. So first thing we want to do is we want to mix up our eggs just a little bit. Just to get them going slightly. Second, we are going to make a well with our flour on our table. And when we do this, we want to make sure that this well is large enough that the eggs are going to fit. If you make it too squatty and tall, the eggs do not fit, and then they have a tendency to spill all over the table. And then you'll be sad. So we have our eggs, and we just simply pour them into our well. Next, most important thing I'd like to mention at this point, notice there's no bowl on our station, and there's no bowl from the flour on our station. The only thing that we have currently is our bench scraper. And the reason for that is you want to keep your station nice and clean and clear so you don't have a lot of clutter anywhere, because if you have that, then things get a little bit confusing. Next, we simply want to act like we're making an omelet. And we're going to pull in some of the flour a little bit at a time. Now, if you have not done this before, I recommend just kind of going slowly so you can get used to what you're doing. If you've never made an omelet, which is hard to believe because you work breakfast station in the second quarter, then this is going to be new to you as well. But what we're doing is we're just incorporating the flour into the egg slowly but surely. And then as we progress, the slurry is going to get thicker and thicker. Now, if for some reason one of these walls on the outside broke and your egg started to run all over the table, that is what the bench scraper is there for. If you do not have your bench scraper on hand, well, your eggs are going to be running everywhere, and you're going to be using your hands to try and grab the eggs that are currently running all over the place. Normally they go right down towards your belly, then down onto your shoes. Just my experience. So, continue to mix these. This is getting nice and thick. They're really not going to run anywhere at this point. So we can take our fork and we can move the flour into the eggs a little bit quicker and a little bit more aggressively. See, now it's not really going to go anywhere. Take your fork and mix this all up. Now we just have kind of a loose bit of dough on our table. Use our bench scraper, clean off our fork. Fork goes away. We do not need that anymore, so take it off of your station. And now we're just going to cut in the flour. We call it that because we're just simply cutting with the bench scraper until we get a nice ball that's workable with our hands. This should look dry. It shouldn't look wet at this point. You want it to be dry and crumbly. Otherwise, it's going to be really challenging to work with. And if it's really wet at this point, your ratios are off when you measure. And that can happen. But try not to let it. Okay, at this point, we are ready to start incorporating with our hands. So we can set our bench scraper aside. We're going to use that again in a minute. Now, we simply start folding in our flour into our dough. Now, at this point, we're doing something called hydrating. We're hydrating the flour with the water from the eggs and the water that we have in our recipe. Now this is the time, if this were very dry and crumbly, we would simply take our squirt bottle and give ourselves a couple of squirts. And what that does is it helps bring in a little bit of water without an excess amount of water. Once our dough is to the point where it's going to come together as a nice ball like this, this is when our bench scraper comes into play, because we're going to clear off all of the dry bits. Because these bits get into your dough, and when they dry out to a certain point, they're not going to mix well with your dough. Worst case is, there's a big dry piece in there, and when you go to roll your dough, it splits it in the pasta machine. So when we're kneading, or as I like to say, hydrating, we take our dough, we fold it over onto itself, and we roll it out. Fold it and roll it. Now, if your stature is not incredibly tall and you're on a tall table, it's going to be rather challenging. In which case, you simply make a modification and you can work the dough like this and you'll get the same effect. But ideally, we continue to hydrate our dough. This should take, the kneading aspect, it should take anywhere between 4 and 10 minutes, depending on the hydration level you started with, how much water versus egg. And whether you have a really light touch with your dough or a heavier touch. But here we've been going at it here for about 2 minutes. And we have a nice ball of dough. It's nice and smooth on the outside. Has a bit of a leathery texture. Notice these little small bits that are falling off. You do not want to incorporate those into your dough. At this point, we'll stop. We're going to wrap this up with some plastic wrap, and then we let this rest for approximately 30 minutes to 2 hours. And then we'll start cutting. And that is your bowl of pasta dough.